doesn't match up. I mean, not even, you don't got to be an Einstein. Like anybody who's reasonable will just be like, wait, that doesn't make sense. And it's, I don't know, the deeper we get into this pandemic, the harder the head scratching and more frequent the head scratching becomes. It's 9:06. Tomas Maglotnia, good morning.
Good morning. Yeah, we're going to continue to scratch our heads here. Some major news yesterday. We reported it last night on Prutehi Litekyan through EarthJustice suing the U.S. Air Force for their failure to comply with the National Environmental Policy Act. And today we have a full slate of speakers, both from Prutehi Litekyan and Save Ritidian. But Chris and Joseph, I was wondering if we could just play the package real quick to set the conversation up for our viewers who might be learning about this for the first time. So we're going to play the story that aired last night, and then we're going to jump into our panel of speakers this morning here on the link.
With the action we filed today, these are open burning, open detonation activities that spread contaminants in the environment, including posing potential threat to the northern aquifer that provides water to 80 to 90% of the people on Guam.
Prutehi Litekyan Save Ritidian is waging a legal battle in federal court. They say the U.S. Air Force failed to comply with the National Environmental Policy Act. At issue, they say the Air Force failed to consider environmental and cultural impact before it applied for a hazardous waste management facility permit for open burn, open detonation on Taragi Beach at Andersen Air Force Base.
It is simply unacceptable for our military to take these types of reckless actions when there are safer alternatives available to threaten the very people that they're sworn to protect.
The Air Force submitted their application last May. Local residents, including those at EarthJustice, reached out to them with concerns in November. It's been radio silent. The plaintiffs note that no open burning has occurred in the past 2 decades. They want a more thorough environmental review, more meaningful public engagement, and more consideration for safer ways. For Maneca Flores, the urgency is rooted in family relations to the land. Her great-grandfather farmed pigs and copra in Taragi before the war and before most of that land was taken by the government.
To see the land that was taken from our family for reasons of security now being used, for recreational use, but moreover being used for these harmful practices that will forever contaminate our drinking water, that will impact our fishing practices, that will impact the practices of us cultivating traditional medicines.
They say the impacts could be irreversible amid hopes of a return to sacred ancestral lands.
Open burn is a practice that is prohibited, and the US EPA has made an exception for particular practices of the military that are permitted. And so this is the way that they're proposing to do it is extremely antiquated and dangerous. And they haven't, as David said, they haven't considered any of the alternatives, including no alternative.
And before news of the filing, JRM Commander Rear Admiral Benjamin Nicholson said he'll comment on the permit at a later time.
I would rather come and circle back with you on that one because I just don't have a lot of the details with me right now.
Meanwhile, Guam EPA PIO Nick Lee told KUAM the agency has not issued a notice of decision for the open burn, open detonation permit. We continue to consult with our counterparts with US EPA, and the application remains under review. Tomas Manglotnia for KUAM News. And now we go over to our KOM News Zoom room where we have representatives from both groups, attorneys David Henkin from EarthJustice, Tian Chow, Maneca Flores from Prutehi Litekyan, Rachel Tamanyao Zuzu, the local attorney here with Prutehi Litekyan. And welcome to all of you. Thanks for joining us this morning. And all right, thanks. And so it's great to have all of you here to provide some perspective. We just ran the story on based on our interview yesterday. I did want to just ask you to, can you set the stage for us again in terms of what EarthJustice and Prutehi Litekyan is exactly seeking here? What do you want the Air Force to do with regards to its application and for a permit to conduct this open burning and open detonation?
Sure, I can take a lead on that, and then maybe Maneca can jump in. So the reason we brought a lawsuit yesterday is that the Air Force failed to comply with a federal law called the National Environmental Policy Act. And very simply, that law requires every federal agency, including the military, to take a real hard look at the impacts of what it's proposing to do and other ways that it might accomplish what it wants to do in a more environmentally safe manner. And in this case, the Air Force is moving ahead with seeking permission to literally blow up bombs on the beach of northern Guam without looking at safer alternatives, ways to dispose of munitions without blowing them up in the open on ancestral lands, on a beach where endangered sea turtles nest. And so basically, it's just this failure to take a look before you leap and look at the impacts of what you're proposing to do and safer ways to do it.
And Monica, I know yesterday when we spoke, you said, this practice of open burn pits, has been pretty much condemned internationally. I wanted to bring some of those facts in at a later point, but I wanted to ask you, because one of the things you said yesterday too was that you not only want them to seek alternatives, but also consider a no alternative, basically not moving forward with this. Can you explain more exactly on why the U.S. Air Force should seek to not do this at all?
Thank you so much, Tomas. So, as we said yesterday, the practice of open burn is a very dangerous practice. In fact, if you look across, the United States at various communities where open burn is happening by the U.S. military, there are extremely high rates of particular forms of illness, cancers, all kinds of environmental issues. There's issues of water contamination, soil contamination. There are towns that basically have to have their water tested on a very regular basis because the contamination is so high. And we're talking about, PFOS, PFAS, lead, magnesium, uranium, plutonium, lots of really dangerous chemicals. And so the practice of open burn is completely banned. It's actually not legal, except for cases where an exemption is given to the U.S. military and is permitted. And so it's like an antiquated practice. It's really outdated technology. And what has happened here is Anderson Air Force Base in their permit application has not considered any alternatives, including the fact that this is a practice that shouldn't take place here. And so that's really what, Prutehi Litekyan's hoping for, that this just doesn't happen at all here in Guam.
Yes, we saw those photos and videos of you making that filing pretty historic. And Rachel and Tian, before asking for your input, I wanted to zoom out a little bit and discuss exactly kind of the historical nature of the United States and kind of internationally as well with regards to open burn pits, because it has been extensively reported on, and as you note in your press release, the science is very clear on this matter. But for our viewers who might just be learning about it, and also curious for EarthJustice, if you might want to correct some of my timeline here. But we first kind of saw a response to this in 2013 when Obama decided to open up that open burn pit registry with regards to military veterans. And then in 2019, President Trump signed one of the bills with regards to burn pits, essentially phasing them out. We have a burn pit registry for veterans. And just in November in 2021, the Biden administration made a pledge saying that for the newest generation of veterans, concerns about burn pits and other exposures continue to mount. And I think one study that was especially interesting that I found, which is available online, came from the Special Inspector General for the Afghanistan Reconstruction, talking about the exposure that veterans and, of course, those living in Afghanistan experienced. Part of the DoD instruction communication there said, open air burn pits should be a short-term solution during contingency operations where no other alternative is feasible. For the long term, incinerators, engineered landfills, or other accepted solid waste management practices are to be used whenever feasible. When used, open air burn pits should be operated in a manner that prevents or minimizes risk to human health and safety of DoD personnel and, where possible, harm to the environment. It's an extensive study, but wanted to bring Rachel and Tian in given that this is the case when it comes to our veterans and the military, and just how egregious this is, does this just further drive the point in terms of your case here in the in federal court on why this shouldn't happen locally?
I think that those points that you just raised are absolutely critical, and it is going to lend basically support in what we're doing. You know, the complaint, as I said yesterday, has alleged that open burning had not been practiced here since 2012, I believe. And so it's been a while, and to restart that practice without knowing what the environmental impacts are going to be. You know, one of the things about the federal legislation is that it requires an environmental assessment, and that's what we're saying has not been done here. It would be very, very critical to know that what the environmental impacts are going to be. And you know, those points that you raised about the hazards to those veterans is definitely a real concern here on the island.
Yeah, I want to add too, and thank you so much for asking that question, because you're absolutely right. There's been a lot of attention paid to open burn pits overseas and the devastating health impacts that has had on veterans, but also folks overseas. And it's really unfortunate that the same attention hasn't been paid to open burning and open detonation domestically. You know, it's not just something that happens during wartime in another country. It happens in everyone's backyards, right? It's happening on the beach on the northern coast in Guam. And while open burning hasn't occurred for a couple of decades or so, open detonation still very much is happening. And they're blowing up munitions right on the beach. And there's just not been enough attention paid to it. There are things that can be done about it, and yet folks aren't talking about it. And really, it might have something to do with the fact that over 90% of the open burn pits and open detonation areas in the country are in low-income areas, and also in many of them in neighborhood and communities of color. So, you know, I'm glad that we're talking about this now, and it's definitely an issue that needs a lot more attention.
And I did also want to point out part of this report that came from the Special Inspector General noted here, environmental planning such as the management of solid waste is not always a high priority because of the operational and logistical pressures, safety and security risks. Of course, this is, like you said, Tian, in this case, it's you know, during wartime, but I guess why would the Air Force seek this particular method, given that those war conditions don't exist at the moment here on Guam? That's just a question for anyone who would.
Okay, well, I think you've just asked the big question, and that's the question that really needs to be put to the Air Force, which is, why are you doing this? What are the impacts? And what are the better ways that you could do this without causing harm to, you know, the environment and the people of Guam? And that's, you know, it's not only the right thing to do for the Air Force to answer those questions, but it's what the law requires. This law has been on the books since 1969. It's not anything new. And when any federal agency, including the Air Force, wants to do something like this, it clearly has the potential to harm the environment, that is going to poison the land, that's going to poison the water, that's going to poison the ocean. It's going to affect fishermen off the shore. You know, when they blow these things up on the beach, there's a safety zone that they established. It's like 2,400 feet across. So it goes way out, like half a mile into the ocean. So you can't even fish there. You know, and these are people's ancestral lands. And, you know, so you ask an excellent question. Why are they doing this? Well, I would say because no one's been paying attention, because no one's been holding them accountable, and because it's easy to do what you've always done in the past rather than try something new that would be better. And what this lawsuit is about is making sure that we hold our military who is there to protect us. You know, they're not supposed to be the threat. They're supposed to be the protectors. So we're holding them accountable to comply with the law and figure out, you know, a way to do it better. And as Moneka pointed out is, you know, and do they even need to do it on Guam at all? Or there are other ways to dispose these munitions that will not expose, you know, the fragile lands and ocean of Guam to this type of impact.
Rachel, did you want to jump in there?
I was just going to add to that sentiment. This application for the permit is not a new application. It's a renewal application by the Air Force, and they've been making these applications to the Guam EPA over several years. And I think an important thing to remember is science changes, and it innovates and it improves on methods that are going to be really, geared to take care of our environment. And I think it's important that the Air Force has to answer to this, and it would be their burden to show through an environmental study, through an environmental assessment, what those alternatives are. It's not our burden to say that. So all we're asking for is the Air Force comply with the law and the legal requirements to submit and obtain these permits.
And I know yesterday you mentioned, and we included in our reporting, you did reach out to the Air Force in November, expressing your concern. Can you just explain that for folks? When did you reach out? What did you say? And I know it's been radio silent since then, but has there been any communication?
Yeah, I'll answer that because I wrote the letter. But after, we met with Prutehi Litekyan, and they raised these concerns about the fact this activity is going on, has been going on. So no open burning, as Tian and Rachel mentioned, no open burning has happened since 2002. But open detonation has been going on, and they've just been kind of putting in these applications without doing any environmental review, without complying with the law. And as folks have mentioned, there are new studies, science evolves. So in 2019, the National Academies put out a study, the US EPA put out a study saying, hey, there's safer ways to do this. And so we spoke with Prutehi Litekyan. They were concerned about the activity. We said, yeah, the law requires that they study the impacts. The law requires that they have and they're not supposed to do it behind closed doors. They're supposed to have a public process that allows members of the community on Guam, but equally important, experts from around the country to weigh in and point out how they could be doing better and what kind of threats they may be posing to the aquifer, to the ocean, to the land by what they're doing. And so, we thought it would be fair to write to the Air Force, because we are not aware of any environmental review that has ever been done that comes remotely close to complying with the law. And so it was November 18th, I wrote to the Air Force and I said, hey, we have these concerns. So we don't think you've complied with the law here. If you believe differently, please let us know. And now 2 months have gone by and it's been complete radio silence. I did call once to see what happened to the letter, make sure they got it. They said, yeah, they got it, and they sent it up to the Navy at the Marianas Joint, Command, and we haven't heard a thing. So now there's a federal lawsuit, and we expect some answers.
And so, what do the next few days, weeks, or months look like with these types of cases? I know EarthJustice, is a national law organization that has taken up many cases. But what does this look like legally, and based on your experience, what might we expect to happen in the next few weeks?
Okay, well, first I'm going to tell you what I'd like to have happen, but and it has occasionally happened. I would like for the Air Force, now that there is a federal lawsuit, to recognize that they haven't done their duty, they haven't complied with the law, and we would like them to withdraw their permit application and then go through the environmental review process that would involve the people of Guam and experts to look at what the impacts of what they've been doing and what they want to keep doing and the better ways that they can do it. That's what I'd like to have happen, and that has happened in my experience, but unfortunately it's the exception. What must happen is within 60 days, the Air Force needs to respond to the complaint that we filed yesterday. And then if they are unwilling to voluntarily comply with the law and withdraw their permit application and go through the public process, then we will bring a motion in federal court to compel them to do that. And we feel very confident that the court will see things our way.
And Monyake, I wanted to ask you in terms of Prutehi Litekyan, are there any other campaigns or moving ahead? Where does your focus turn to now?
Well, Tomas, thanks for that question. We have a lot of projects going on all the time, whether it's a film series or a podcast series or a scholarship, but I really want to talk about building solidarity in this moment because it's so important to connect this issue to the water contamination happening on Oahu, to that is military, that is the U.S. military contaminating the water in the community, for the community in Oahu. And we can look at similar issues of water contamination by the U.S. military in Okinawa and their sole source aquifer also being contaminated. And it's important to connect these issues. And so PLSR it has been and will continue to engage in a lot of solidarity work. We've been participating in a lot of meetings with various groups. We've actually attended a meeting with the US EPA to ask them to end to end the fact that they allow through their permits, the military to conduct open burn. So we want them to stop that exemption for the Department of Defense. And so, we're continuing to do this work in many other ways. And so we have other meetings. Now there's a meeting with the White House Environmental Committee coming up. And so we're just trying everything we can, meeting with various entities to do like this, just take as many approaches as we can, because this is a very serious issue and it's very urgent. And of course, also engaging the public in becoming more aware of these risks and ways that they can support this work as well.
And I did want to ask David and Thien why EarthJustice decided to back this effort. I know you explained the merits of your case, but is this the first time EarthJustice has gotten involved in matters here on Guam?
Not at all. I work in EarthJustice's Mid-Pacific office, which is in Honolulu, and I'd like to just, really emphasize what Maneka just said. As island peoples, we understand that our water supply is irreplaceable. We can't drive over state lines. If we can't drink the water out of our tap, we're stuck, And so EarthJustice has been working on these issues here in Hawaii, where I live, on the Red Hill matter with the Navy's contamination of water supply. And that's why we were deeply concerned when Prutehi Litekyan approached us about the threats to Guam's water supply and its environment and culture for this activity. We have been involved in the past in litigation in the Marianas involving the military buildup, bringing suit against the U.S. Navy because of the impacts on the Northern Marianas of training on Tinian and Pagan. And I personally was also involved in litigation back in around 2000 to protect some of the last remaining habitat for Guam's native species, including on Andersen Air Force Base. So it's been a long time since I've been personally involved in Guam federal court, but I welcome the opportunity to continue to make these connections across the Pacific and protect our islands from these threats.
All right, thank you all for your time. Is there anything else anyone wants to add here before we wrap?
I would actually just like to add that, I just want to take a moment to thank Senator Sabina Perez, because she is the person who really called the Guam Environmental Protection Agency to task to discuss this permit application publicly. And that is what really got Prutehi Litekyan involved. We attended that public hearing. We met with Jane Williams with the California Community Against Toxics and Laura Ola from the Ceasefire Campaign. And it's because of those connections and that work that we were also able to link with EarthJustice and move forward with these actions. And so these are all connected. So I just really wanted to mention that and thank her for her work as well.
All right, thank you so much, and of course we'll be in touch with the developments of the case, and hopefully yesterday we got a chance to interview Rear Admiral Benjamin Nicholson, who said he had to circle back because he didn't have the information, so hopefully he gets the information and we can have a chance to ask him about it as well. So thank you so much, Rachel, David, Thien, and Moniaka. Appreciate your time.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Yeah.
Anytime.
Thanks. All right, so we just heard from Prutehi Litekyan and EarthJustice with regards to their legal battle, which they waged in federal court against the U.S. Air Force with regards to their application for a permit, which they say violated the National Environmental Policy Act because they failed to conduct proper consultation and preparation. For that, I did want to read, though, yesterday we did get a response from Guam EPA PIO Nick Lee, who told us that the agency has not issued a notice of decision for the open burn, open detonation permit. He says we continue to consult with our counterparts with U.S. EPA, and the application remains under review. And the application submitted last